They didn't slam the door when they left. No dramatic exit, no last scream, no fight that could explain the silence that followed. Just quiet. A stillness so deafening it echoed louder than any goodbye ever could. That's how you know it was real, because it didn't make noise. They slipped out like smoke, evaporating into the night as if they'd never been there at all. But they were. And now, everything around you whispers their absence. The walls remember. The floor remembers. Even the air carries the ghost of their footsteps. The ones that never came back. You stood there, didn't you? Frozen. Not because you couldn't move, but because you couldn't understand. Your body knew they were gone, but your heart was still waiting for the doorknob to turn, still praying that maybe, just maybe, this was all just a cruel pause before the return. But they didn't come back. Days passed, then weeks. Then the ache stretched into something timeless. Not pain, not even grief. Just a raw, heavy emptiness that sunk its claws into your ribs and refused to let go. The kind of silence that sits beside you like an unwanted friend. And you asked yourself the question you still can't answer. How could they leave so easily? How could someone who touched your soul forget your name without stuttering? How could someone who knew the shape of your vulnerability treat it like it was disposable? They saw you, raw, unarmored, open, and they left anyway. No warning, no explanation, no guilt. Like loving you had been an accident they were cleaning up. Like you were a beautiful mistake that needed erasing. You gave them everything, didn't you? Every soft piece of yourself, every late-night version of your heart, every ounce of your loyalty, even when it hurt. You silenced your needs just to amplify theirs, and in return, they gave you nothing but silence. A void dressed in the memory of what once was. It doesn't make sense, does it? You didn't imagine the love. It was real. It was fire. It burned in both of you, or so you thought. Maybe it only burned in you. Maybe they were never warm. They just stood close enough to your flame to feel something, then walked away before it asked too much of them. The worst part? It wasn't the leaving. It was the ease with which they did it. The way they made detachment look like self-care. The way they walked away guiltless, like your pain was just background noise they had the right to mute. And now you sit in a room that still holds their shadow, trying to reconcile their freedom with your chain, trying to understand how someone who meant everything to you could act like you were nothing more than a chapter they were glad to close. It's the unanswered questions that tear you apart. Not just why, but how. How do people forget the hands that held them when they were breaking? How do they unlove the heart that bled for them? How do they walk away from loyalty without limping from the weight of it? You were never perfect. You know that. But you showed up. You stayed. You loved hard. You chose them, even when it meant losing parts of yourself. And still they chose to leave, without a backward glance, without the decency of remorse. They left without guilt. But the room still reeks of what they took. Not the objects, not the clothes or the memories. They took your peace, your sense of worth, your reflection, now distorted by the question of whether you were ever enough. You replay conversations, searching for signs. Was it something you said? Something you missed? But there's no closure here. Just echoes, just the weight of presence turned to absence. And still, somehow, you breathe. You wake up in the same silence they left behind. You carry the ghost of that moment in your chest like a stone, heavy, cold, but you carry it. You don't scream it. You don't show it. The world sees your strength, but they don't see the battlefield beneath your skin. The war between who you were before they left and who you've become since. You're still standing. Broken, maybe, but standing. And that matters. That means something. Because even though they left without guilt, you stayed with grace. Even though they disappeared like cowards, you faced the storm they left behind. You didn't run. You didn't collapse. You learned how to breathe in a world that no longer smelled like them. That is power. Quiet, unseen, underestimated power. They may have walked away without a second thought, but you're still here. And one day, the silence they left will speak louder than any apology they never gave. One day, they'll hear what absence sounds like. And when they do, it'll be your name, echoing through the emptiness. Not theirs, not anymore. They saw your smile and believed it. They saw you laugh and thought you were okay. They nodded at your "I'm fine" and walked away without a second thought. But behind your eyes, the storm never stopped. Behind closed doors, you collapsed into the kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room. It drowns it. You were bleeding where no one could see, wounds that didn't show on the skin, bruises no light could find. And that's the cruelest kind of pain, isn't it? The kind that leaves no proof, no cast, no stitches, just the invisible weight of carrying what should have killed you. You became an expert in performance, a master of masks. Your smile became your shield, your laughter, your camouflage. But inside, you were screaming into a void, begging for someone to notice. Not for pity, not even for help, just for acknowledgement, just for someone to look close enough to say, "I see you breaking." But no one did. They only saw what you let them see, and you were too tired, too proud, too afraid to let the mask slip. So you danced on broken bones. You laughed with lungs full of fire. You held yourself together with trembling hands while the world kept spinning like your suffering was irrelevant. Because when they left, they didn't just abandon you. They rewrote your worth on their way out. They made their exit look like a commentary on your value. Like you were the reason they disappeared. Like your love wasn't enough, your loyalty too loud, your presence too heavy, and in their silence they whispered lies that embedded themselves in your skin. Asterisk. You weren't worth staying for. You weren't enough to fight for. You were too much. You were never enough. You started believing those lies, didn't you? You started to wonder if maybe love really is conditional, if maybe somehow this is your fault. You replayed every conversation, every look, every moment, dissecting yourself like a crime scene, searching for proof that you're the reason people leave. You started to apologize for simply existing, for having needs, for loving too hard. You weren't just hurt, you were convinced you deserved it. That's how betrayal works. It doesn't stab you, it convinces you to hand over the knife. And so the pain turned inward. It coiled itself around your thoughts like a parasite, whispering doubt into every dream. You questioned your value. You shrank in conversations. You apologized for taking up space. You flinched at kindness because it felt foreign, undeserved. You stopped asking for anything, stopped reaching, stopped hoping, because hope started to feel like a setup. Like the prelude to another fall. You stopped trusting your own heart because every time it opened, someone took from it and never gave back. You bled in silence, hoping the floor would absorb your pain and not echo it. You cried into pillows so no one would hear. You smiled in mirrors you couldn't look into. You became a fortress with a heartbeat, a ruin with a voice. You learned how to function while dying on the inside, and the world kept applauding your strength, never realizing they were applauding your survival, not your peace. But something started to shift, didn't it? Not a scream, not a war, just a quiet anger, a subtle resentment, a question whispered in the dark, asterisk. Why do I hurt and they sleep? Why do I carry the pieces and they walk whole? That was the seed, the first spark, the beginning of the burn. You didn't even know it yet, but a fire had been lit beneath the weight of your pain. Resentment is a dangerous thing because it doesn't roar. It simmers, and in that simmering, it waits for the moment when your silence will no longer be enough. You were never the villain, but you were told to feel like one. You were never broken, but you were made to believe you should be fixed. They left without a backward glance, but you carried their departure like a curse, like you were the reason they didn't stay. That's the lie they left you with. Not just abandonment, but the echo of worthlessness. And now you live with it. Or rather, you've survived with it. But survival isn't the end of the story. You know now that just because a wound doesn't show, doesn't mean it didn't bleed. Just because you wore your pain well, doesn't mean it didn't cost you everything. And just because they never saw your suffering doesn't mean it wasn't real. It was, it is, and one day, that seed of resentment will grow into something unrecognizable, something powerful, something righteous, but not yet, not today. Today, you still sit in the shadow of what they left behind. You still cradle the broken pieces, not because you're weak, but because you're loyal to your healing. You haven't roared yet, but you will. The storm hasn't broken, but it's coming. And when it does, the world won't just see your pain. They'll feel it. They'll know what you carried, what you bled for, what they never saw until it became too big to ignore. They left you with silence. You answered with survival. But survival was never the goal. And you were never meant to be small. There was a time, too many times, when you swallowed yourself just to keep someone else whole. You clipped your wings, bent your spine, bit your tongue until it bled, all so they could stay comfortable in your presence. You carved pieces out of your soul and handed them over like love offerings, praying it would be enough, hoping this time they'd stay, this time they'd see you, this time they'd choose you back. But they never did they? You remember the moments, each one sharp like shattered glass. The dinner where you smiled through disrespect, the morning you silenced your truth to keep their peace, the days you played small so they could feel big. You laughed at jokes that stung, stood behind them in rooms where you should have stood beside them. You dimmed your light over and over, just so theirs could flicker a little brighter. You were never competing, just giving, always giving. But they were only ever taking. You broke your back to build their throne. Every sacrifice, every silence, every second guessing of your own worth was another brick in a monument to someone who never deserved worship. You weren't weak. You were loyal. That's the difference they'll never understand. You weren't spineless. You were hopeful. That's the tragedy they'll never admit. And still, they looked at everything you gave and asked, asterisk, what else? They called you too much, even as they consumed every last drop of your kindness. Somewhere along the way, you stopped recognizing yourself. Who were you becoming just to keep them? What parts of you did you bury so they could bloom? You adjusted your laughter, your clothes, your silence, your dream. You turned your joy down to a whisper so theirs could roar. You learned to apologize for your passion. You became so focused on being enough for them that you forgot what it felt like to be enough for yourself. And for what? Their validation, their crumb, their approval, tossed at you like favors instead of earned respect. They never saw you, not really. They saw what you could do for them, what you could fix, what you could carry. You weren't a person in their eyes. You were a service, a comfort, a mirror for their ego. And once you stopped reflecting the version of themselves they liked, they disappeared. They didn't leave because you failed. They left because they finished feasting on your kindness, your light, your love, your loyalty. They were never building with you. They were feeding off you. And once full, they walked away without so much as a thank you. It hits you in waves now. The rage, the grief, they clash like storms inside you. One minute you miss them. The next, you want to scream. You want to go back and shake the version of you that gave so freely to those who only took. But don't hate that version. Don't shame that heart. That version of you loved with bravery. That version of you held on when others would have run. That version of you had a fire in their chest even when the world turned cold. But now, you're waking up, slowly, brutally, beautifully. The blindfold is off. The illusion is cracking. You can see it now. Every sacrifice was a scream. Every silence was a wound. Every yes when you meant no was a little funeral for your own truth. But you're done dying for people who wouldn't bleed for you. You're done trading pieces of your soul for the privilege of being tolerated. This isn't self-pity. This is self-reckoning. This is the moment when you stop blaming yourself for being used and start holding them accountable for using you. This is where your forgiveness meets a boundary, where your love meets a lock, where your heart doesn't harden, but it gets smarter, wiser, less willing to burn just to keep others warm. They'll tell the story differently, of course. They'll paint themselves the victim. They'll say you changed, that you became cold. But they'll never admit they lit the fire that burned you. They'll never confess that your rage is just grief that ran out of tears, and that's fine. Let them choke on their version of the truth. You've carried their weight long enough. You don't owe them any more explanation, not for your silence, not for your distance, not for your healing, because the truth is, your loyalty was never the problem. Their hunger was. Your compassion was never your weakness. Their consumption was. You didn't lose them, they lost you. And one day, when the echoes of your absence ring louder than your presence ever did, they'll finally understand what they walked away from. But by then, you'll be gone, not just from their life, but from that version of yourself who bent, broke, and bled to be seen. You're not that person anymore. You've mourned them, and now you're rising from the ashes of your own sacrifice, reborn not as someone harder, but as someone wiser, someone who will never again carve their soul to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You gave them everything, and they left without looking back. But now they carry the weight of your silence, of your strength, of your transformation. And you carry only what's yours, not their shame, not their story, just your truth, and the fire they tried to snuff out, but couldn't. There comes a moment, brutal and unforgiving, when you can no longer run, not from them, not from the pain, not from the hollow just beneath your ribcage. There comes a moment when the mirror becomes a battlefield. No more distractions, no more pretending, no more fantasy to hide inside. Just you, bare, broken, breathing. You stare at your own reflection, and for the first time, you don't look away. You see it all now. The tired eyes, the silent screams buried in your stare, the tight jaw clenched from years of swallowing hurt, the posture of someone who carried too much for too long. You see the cracks you tried to ignore, the exhaustion etched into your skin like warning. You see a version of yourself you once loved, but now barely recognize. You don't pity them, but you mourn them, because that person, that version of you, was loyal to cowards, gentle with destroyers, soft in the hands of stone. And now there's no more space for illusion, no more room for excuses. You call it what it is. You gave your fire to those who only came for warmth. You gave your love to people who never intended to love you back. You built altars for those who only knew how to kneel when they wanted something. And you gave without measure, without question, without pause. Not because you were weak, not because you were naive, but because your heart was too full and too fierce to calculate cost. But cost there was. Oh, there was cost. You lost time, energy, pieces of your identity. You gave up sleep to chase peace. You lost dreams trying to fulfill someone else's vision. You gave up laughter to avoid confrontation. You let go of your boundaries like sand through your fingers, hoping, praying that sacrifice would be enough, that they'd see it, value it, reciprocate it. But they didn't. They only ever took. And now, as you stare into your own eyes, you say it, finally, out loud. No more whispers, no more hesitation. I wasn't weak. I was too strong for too long. Too strong for the ones who mistook endurance for permission. Too strong for the ones who believed silence was surrender. Too strong for the world that praises survival but ignores the scars. And now, you're tired, but beneath the exhaustion, something else stirs. Something cold, something sharp, a clarity that doesn't flinch. You begin to list it, don't you? All the things you gave up, all the moments you betrayed yourself just to be accepted. You remember the dinner you skipped to answer their call, the dream you abandoned because they mocked it, the parts of your personality you edited because it made them uncomfortable. You remember the messages you never sent, the truths you never told, the emotions you buried so deep they became ghosts inside your chest. This is the war, the one no one sees. Pain versus self-respect. The ache of loss against the need for dignity. You want to scream. You want to curl into yourself and disappear. But instead you do something harder. You stay, you stare, you confront. You look that bruised version of yourself in the mirror and you say, *, enough, *. Not with tears, not with rage, but with a cold, steady voice that doesn't shake anymore. The fire is coming back, but it's different now. No longer a desperate blaze trying to warm the unworthy, no longer a flicker begging to be seen. This fire is something else, something dangerous. It's forged in ash, refined by silence, born from clarity. This is the fire of someone who has nothing left to prove, but everything left to protect. You see it, don't you? The metaphor begins to take form. Ashes where innocence once stood, charcoal dreams, burned bridges that you'll never cross again. But here's the secret they never told you. Ashes are not the end. They're the beginning. Rebirth doesn't start with light. It starts with ruin. It starts with a broken mirror, a shattered illusion, a soul stripped bare of lies. The naivety is gone now. That soft hope that they'd come back, that they'd realize what they lost, that they'd apologize, explain, undo. No, you don't wait for that anymore. You don't need their words to find your peace. You don't need their presence to reclaim your power. You were the home. You were the fire. You were the miracle they couldn't recognize. And now they're gone, and you're still here, not whole, not healed, but awake. And sometimes that's more powerful than anything. Because when awareness rises, nothing can stay the same. Not your relationships, not your standards, not your silence. You begin to move differently, speak differently, trust differently, not out of fear, but out of truth. The truth the mirror forced you to see. They don't get to define your reflection anymore. They don't get to live in your head rent-free. They don't get to shape your story with their absence. Because now you write it in your words, in your voice, in your scars that don't beg for pity, but serve as proof that you endured the fire and emerged with eyes wide open. This is the death of delusion, the end of fantasy, the burial of hope that hurt you more than helped. And in that grave of illusions, something else is blooming, cold, sharp, and holy. A version of you that bows to no one, that questions everything, that refuses to ever again hand their worth to someone else like a gift waiting to be broken. The mirror doesn't lie. It never did. You just weren't ready to see. But now you are. It doesn't start with peace. It starts with rage. The kind of rage that simmers low in your belly before it erupts into something divine. Not the chaos of losing control, but the exact opposite. The precision of finally seizing it. Because after all the pain, all the silence, all the self-doubt, something inside you snaps, but not in weakness, in clarity, in resurrection. You thought pain would break you, but pain woke the wolf. And now your bones hum with the sound of war drums. This is the turning point, the shift. You don't cry this time. You don't plead. You don't hope. You burn. You ignite. Anger, once something you feared, becomes the very thing that steadies your hand. It's no longer a curse. It's a compass, a signal fire in the darkness. It says, asterisk, something sacred was violated. It says, asterisk, no more. It says, asterisk, I remember everything, and I'm not sorry anymore. You remember it all, don't you? Every time they dismissed your voice like it was background noise. Every time they looked through you like you were invisible. Every time they made you feel like you had to asterisk, earn asterisk, what should have been yours by right. Respect, care, presence. You remember every minimized emotion. Every moment they rolled their eyes at your pain. Every time you made yourself smaller, quieter, gentler, just to keep the peace that only benefited them. But that version of you, the one who tolerated it, they're gone, buried in the wreckage. And from their grave, something darker, sharper, more powerful rises. You are the silence they left, now screaming back in storms. You're no longer asking to be seen. You're becoming impossible to ignore. The furnace of transformation has begun to burn, and it's not here to warm. It's here to incinerate every lie you were told about your worth. You don't chase anymore. You don't beg. You don't stretch yourself thin like thread trying to sew something broken. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop handing out your story like a defense, because now you understand. You owe no closure to those who closed their eyes to your worth. None. Let them wonder. Let them build their own illusions about your silence. You have nothing left to prove, and everything left to build. You feel it in your chest, don't you? That pulse of power returning. You walk differently now, not because the weight is gone, but because you've learned to carry it like a weapon. You speak differently now, not to be palatable, but to be real. You breathe fire now, not to destroy, but to cleanse. You are not the version of yourself they walked over. You are the reckoning they never saw coming. This is what they didn't expect. They thought leaving would end you. They thought your silence meant surrender. They thought you'd stay in that corner, grieving and questioning forever. But what they never understood is that pain is fertile ground, and in your ruin, something immortal took root. A rage laced with purpose, a fury forged in betrayal, a storm that doesn't apologize for its thunder. You are not just healing now. You are evolving. You are building a spine from all the times you bent. You are sharpening your voice with every word you swallowed. You are growing armor from every time they left you exposed. This rage, it's not about revenge. It's about recognition of yourself, of your worth, of your right to take up space, to be whole, to stop bleeding just to make others comfortable. You light the match now. You choose the fire, because you finally understand that destruction is not always death. Sometimes it's liberation. Sometimes it's how you make room for what was never allowed to grow. You're not afraid of burning bridges anymore, because you've realized some paths were only meant to be walked once. Let them talk. Let them twist the story. Let them lie about who you are to soothe their own guilt. You're not chasing reputation. You're claiming truth, and truth doesn't need permission to roar. This is the sound of your return, not as the person who waited, but as the one who rises, fueled not by vengeance, but by vision, by the knowing that your time of mourning is over and the era of reclamation has begun. They left, thinking you were finished, but all they did was clear the stage for your entrance. You are the aftermath now, the lesson they'll never outrun. So let the rage rise, let it speak, let it guide. This is not the end of your story. It's the fire chapter, the one where everything they thought would ruin you becomes the very force that redefines you. It doesn't start with applause. It doesn't start with understanding glances or warm reassurances. It begins in silence, raw, undramatic, sacred. No audience, no music, just you and the ruin, the wreckage they left behind, the shattered foundation you once called home. And yet somehow, you're still breathing, still standing. Maybe not tall, maybe not proud, but there, present, a heartbeat in the aftermath. This is where the real work begins, the rebuild. Not the glamorous kind they write about, not the overnight transformation. No, this is brick by broken brick. This is choosing yourself when no one else shows up. This is making peace with the quiet and calling it home. There is a strength here, quiet, steady, invisible to most. But it's the kind of strength that never dies, the kind that whispers, "I'll build anyway." You start small, a new habit, a boundary enforced, a truth spoken, a moment taken just for you. Not because it's productive or impressive, but because it's yours. You stop waiting for validation. Stop checking the door for the ones who left. You stop molding yourself into what they wanted. You no longer shrink. You no longer explain. You no longer apologize for needing space, silence, or sovereignty. This time, it's different. This time, every step forward is intentional. Every decision is a quiet rebellion. Every breath, a declaration. Asterisk, I deserve to be here. You look at the scars, not with shame, but with reverence. These aren't marks of defeat. These are battle lines, proof you stood in fire and came out forward. These scars tell your story louder than any voice could. And finally, you stop trying to hide them. You're not rising as some perfect, polished version of healing. You rise not as a phoenix, but as the flame itself, burning with your own permission, needing no myth to justify your rebirth. You are not the ashes. You are not the ruin. You are the fire that chose to keep burning long after the fuel was gone. And people notice. Oh, they notice. But it no longer matters. Their opinions, their confusion, their inability to understand your journey. You're not building for them anymore. You're not seeking their approval. You don't need to be seen to be valid. The beauty of your rebuild is that it's deeply, profoundly yours. Every brick laid is a middle finger to the voices that told you to stay broken. Every wall risen is a declaration of boundaries, non-negotiable, sacred. You find peace in places you once feared. Solitude no longer suffocates. It sings. Silence no longer haunts. It heals. You stop trying to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding. You stop offering pieces of your soul in exchange for temporary company. You stop begging to be chosen, because now you choose yourself. Again and again, there's a rhythm forming now, a sacred cadence. Wake, breathe, heal, repeat. Some days, it's messy. Some days, it hurts. But every day, it's real. And that's enough. You don't need to pretend anymore. You don't need to wear the mask. The person you're becoming honors the pain that built them. You don't deny your past. You build from it. You begin to see your own reflection not with judgment, but with awe. You begin to recognize the softness that survived the storm, the fierceness that carried you through it, the resilience that never needed an audience to thrive. You're no longer asking the world to witness your strength. You no asterisk, it's there, quiet, immovable, absolute. So let them watch, let them whisper, let them wonder how you did it. You don't owe them the blueprint. You don't owe them the backstory. You owe only yourself the truth. And the truth is this: you rebuilt a life from ashes they left behind. And you did it with bare hands, bloodied knuckles, and a heart that refused to stop beating. This is power, not the loud kind, not the staged kind, but the sacred kind. The kind that doesn't flinch, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that stands alone in the rubble and decides to rise again and again. And again. The memories return, not to haunt, but to heal. Not as ghosts, but as echoes, finally ready to be heard without distortion. This time, they don't break you. They bow to you. Because you're no longer trapped in them. You're standing above them, torch in hand, ready to rewrite the script they tried to bury you in. Flashbacks come like a storm, but you don't run. You face them. You stand in the eye. You revisit the betrayals, the goodbyes, the cruel silences, not as a victim, but as a witness. You watch your younger self cry out into empty rooms, waiting for someone who would never come. But now you step into those scenes with open eyes. Now you hold that version of yourself the way no one else ever did. They weren't your home. They were your hurricane. They weren't your safe place.